Revitalization series.
Good morning. For those who don't know, my name is Jen Tinkler, and I'm the Executive Director here at Marrieta Main Street. Thank you all for coming out today. I think this is a pretty important topic. You all received a public art walking guide when you came in, so you can see that we have several murals in town. I hope that after these presentations you get out and you check those out, because the three people that you're going to meet here at Marrieta Main Street were instrumental in all of those.
Thanks for coming out to our beautiful town of Marrieta and our beautiful theater here. It should be a lovely day to go walk around and see some of the murals around town. Like Jen said, my name is Bobby Rosenstock. I've sat on the board of Marrieta Main Street for 4 years now, during which time I've also served as the chair of our public art committee. I'm also a local business owner. I own a letterpress shop down on Front Street that specializes in woodcut posters. So if you want to come see me during your lunch break, I'll have my shop open. So let's get started. So I believe this is the first mural that we worked on. His project that happened before my time. My wife, Sarah, who's a graphic design professor at the college, was actually involved with the public art committee at the time. And they identified this wall on the corner of Front and Butler Street, right downtown, as a prime place to install a mural. And they came up with the idea of putting in a historic mural, using the historic photographs from the Marrieta College Special Collections. If you are looking to get started in public art in your community and don't know where to start, doing a historic mural of some sort is a great way to start. It's hard to get, everyone will be on board. People have all sorts of different opinions on art, but a historic mural is something that you can get everyone rallied behind. Also, in today's kind of day and age, doing murals that are ground level are really helpful as well, because everyone wants to take photos in front of murals. So having stuff, if you have a wall that's ground level, it's a great way to install your first mural, because people will be taking photos in front of it. The other thing that got us kick-started on murals was this new technology that you're going to learn about from Jordana. These poly printed murals. They're printed on a thin poly material that are heat set to the walls. Like many of you, I'm sure we have a lot of historic buildings downtown, and not everyone wants their old brick painted over. These temporary murals don't damage the brick. They can be expensive. They don't last forever. Jordana will be giving you a little bit more information on them, but this was a great way to kind of kickstart our mural program. The other thing with this is there was a lot of room along this wall. So the project started with 2 pieces, and then that we installed the first year, and then as we raised more money, we were slowly able to add to the project by adding photos, historic photos, and little information plaques, because people want to know what they're looking at. The image on the left is tied to the David McCullough book, which came out Pioneers About Marrieta, so that was choosing of that, and we had a ton of tourism based off of his book that came out, and that was the black and white engraving that inspired the cover art for his book. So moving on from, and this was, these last 2 was the first project I took on as chair of the Public Art Committee. So when I took on the committee, there was 2 panels left in this mural series that were still available. And so the first project we took on was finishing up this mural series. The next project we took on was this mural here. So when we were looking around our town and trying to decide what we wanted to do as a public art committee, the first things we identified were a few locations around town that would be prime locations for murals in town. This location was what kind of kickstarted things. It was catty corner to the other historic mural series that you saw there, and it was a bigger wall. We knew we wanted to move away from the historic imagery and do something a little bit more fun. And then I believe we identified the artist next, Alex Northrup, who's going to be talking later. We invited her to join the art committee first, I remember. Alex was a designer in town who I hadn't met but had admired her work for a while. And we knew we wanted to get her involved with the committee. So we invited her to join the committee, and then we asked her if she would be interested in working on this mural here. So first things first, we have to get permission from the building owner to use the wall. So we identified an artist and the location. First, our committee, we reached out to the business that was inside the building and told them what we were thinking about. They were on board. Then we had to reach out to the owner of the building. They were on board. And then we had to come up with some artwork, a concept. So at the time, the way things were working have changed a little bit, but at the time, how things worked was that we were getting the building owner to sign a contract saying that we were going to install a mural on their building. Marrieta Main Street's Public Art Committee was going to come up with the concept art for the building. They weren't going to be able to dictate the art. We were going to show them a rough draft of the art that they could sign off on to approve it before it went on the wall to make sure they were okay with it, but we were 100% coming up with the concept, and we were also 100% paying for the art. Since then, we now ask for a contribution from the business owners, usually around 25% of the cost, but we still come up with the concept art ourselves. So there's different ways you could go about creating a mural like this. You can contract it up to like an artist and have them come up with the idea and pitch it to like the committee as the client. But for this project, we actually worked as a group to come up with the concept art. So I remember, and Alex was part of this committee, so was Jordana, who installed this art. And we sat around a table and we had a whiteboard, I remember, and Christy Thomas, the former director of Main Street, was at the whiteboard, and we first identified some themes that maybe we might want our mural to represent. And I think the themes were history, outdoor recreation, nature, and community, something like that. And then I think we broke that down to nature and community. And from there, we came up with the idea of what if we had something that was garden themed, and we knew we wanted it to be a text-based piece, because Alex specializes in hand lettering. We wanted it to be a text-based piece, and we thought it would be cool to do something that tied in some sort of quote or pun or saying that tied in gardening and community. And we just started throwing out ideas and looking at quotes on our phones, and we probably wrote down 20 or 30 different things on the whiteboard, and then narrowed it down to this. And then Alex took this and just kind of ran with it. She sketched up quite a few, I think 4 or 5 different concepts using the quotes we came up with, and then pitched them to our committee, and then we voted on them and we chose one. We ran it by the building owner, they approved it, and then we installed it. So there's a lot of steps, and this project amazingly went really smoothly. Not every project we've worked on when we're managing so many things has actually run smoothly like that. Okay, so the next thing, we finished that project up, and I don't think we were in the midst of discussing what we wanted to take on next. Once that mural went up, it got a ton of attention. People were taking tons of photos. One other thing, we came up with a hashtag for our murals, which under the window you can could see a little hashtag, My Marietta Murals, that we put on all of our murals. Because people were taking tons of photos on Instagram and Facebook, and we were encouraging them to use our hashtag so we can then go through Instagram and stuff and see how our murals are being used and how much engagement they're getting on social media. So next project, Greta German, a building owner, actually reached out to us, saying she had a mural project she was interested in. She owned a few buildings in town, and I went and sat down with Greta, and she told me this story of she has this parking garage. You could see in the top building with the green mural, that's her building, and then to the right of that, there's a big parking garage with a lower and an upper section. It's between Front and 2nd Street here in downtown Marietta, and she was having tons of issues with graffiti, people leaving trash, doing drugs, all sorts of issues back there. And she told me this story of when she tried putting up a gate so people couldn't come up to her upper level garage area. She tried putting in cameras, she put up signs, and nothing at all worked. People just hopped the gate, they ignored the cameras. Eventually, she tried a different approach in which she took down the gate and the cameras and the signs, and instead decided to just kind of take care of the area, and she hung some string lights up there, and she installed two little selfie station murals, one of like angel wings and one of a bunch of hearts. And she told some of her photographer friends that they're welcome to go up there and take pictures up there. And she immediately noticed that people stopped disrespecting her space up top. And so this story really, I really related to this. It reminded me of, so I lived in Philadelphia before I moved here in 2009. And I remember going to a presentation by the director of the Philadelphia mural program, which is one of the largest in the country. And they told a similar story about how Philadelphia, which is notorious for having a bunch of really, really tough and rundown neighborhoods, of this kind of area in Philadelphia where there was like a burned out house and this empty lot that was having all these issues with drugs and crime and littering and graffiti, and they tried all these things like policing, adding police, putting up cameras, signs, all this stuff. Nothing worked. They were throwing tons of money at the issue, trying to figure it out. And eventually they tried a different approach in which the mural program came in and they cleaned up that area and turned the empty lot into like a little parklet. And they put in a sculpture there. They painted a huge mural on the side of the building and put a few benches in. And the cost of doing that was significantly less than like all the policing tactics that went into it. And immediately the communities felt like they were being represented, they felt like they were being respected, and they started self-policing the area and started taking care of it, and crime and drugs and all those issues went away. And that story always stuck with me. And so Greta telling me this, I really related to it. And so she cleaned up the upper area of her garage, and her thought is that she was still having issues underneath the garage. It was kind of dank and dusty, covered in graffiti, smelled kind of bad, and she thought it would be cool to do some murals on all. There was a ton of walls in there, and she's like, you guys can just have at it. We talked it over as a committee and came up with the idea that we thought like this was, when you have a wall on a historic building that's right in the heart of downtown, you want to do a certain sort of mural. When you have a parking garage kind of in an alleyway in the back, you do a different kind of mural. I think one of our city council members described it as Marietta's public art is like a mullet, in which it's nice and clean on Front Street, and then the alleys, it gets a little funky. And this is kind of more the funky side of some of our murals. What what we did for this project was we invited 14 artists from the community, ranging from students to professional artists to professors, and told them we are buying a whole bunch of paint, and we are going to spend an entire day, just one day, painting together. You know, if you have some ideas, you could bring a sketchbook or whatever, but just come, you know, just come and let's just play around. And so that's what happened. A bunch of 14 artists came together and we just painted. Some people had like ideas that were planned out a little bit more. Some people just experimented on the spot. We did decide that the green kind of rolling hills mural, Alex Northrop came up with that design, and we decided we wanted to do something a little bit more abstract and simplistic on the front wall that you can actually see from Front Street that would bring you in. And then once you get under the parking structure is where it gets a little bit more fun and playful. And we have a little video. So we also hired a videographer to document the process. Beth is a college professor. Erin is also a professor at the college. Haley was a student at the college and now a high school teacher. Jeff is one of our city council members that came out and painted. Kat was another student. Meg owns a tattoo shop in town. Emma's a high school art teacher. That's my wife Sarah, who's the design professor at the college. That's the building owner who got involved a little bit. That was that project. That was. Oops, forgot to turn off the. Yeah, so that project wound up being, really cool. Tons of people were going down there taking photos. Unfortunately, since that mural has gone up, there has been damage to the parking structure. A large utility truck drove up there that wasn't supposed to and damaged the foundation, and so it's now gated off. So if you go down there, you can see the big kind of Green Hills mural, and you can look at the mural through a gate, but there's a gate. The building owner is committed to preserving the murals somehow and looking into fixing the structure, but it's going to be major repairs. So that's kind of things that sometimes happen with old buildings, that you can kind of run into issues like that. We had a similar issue with a historic mural in town that was painted on interior brick that kind of that started to flake off and had to be repaired. But things happen. and that's part of doing public art. We're hoping the building could get saved and the murals can be saved, but we're not sure how long that might take. So the next project we took on, we identified another prime space in town, which was this tunnel in downtown, or bike path that runs along the confluence of the two rivers. Is super popular, gets tons of traffic, and it goes through this tunnel under the Putnam Street Bridge. The tunnel previously had a pretty amateur-ish, like stick figure type mural of like boats and stuff that some students had done, and it had been heavily graffitied over. So we identified this as like a prime location that we wanted to work with. We reached out to the city and the mayor, and they gave us permission to work down here on the tunnel. The city went in and power washed for us. We partnered with the local Rotary Club, who helped us with priming and laying down a base of color paint in the mural. Let's see. So once we identified the space for this mural, we came up with a theme. Again, the art committee decided that it would be cool to do like an underwater theme in the tunnel, and we also wanted it to be educational. So we wanted all the flora and fauna represented in the mural to be actual things found in the rivers here in town. We partnered with the Ohio Wildlife Islands National Refuge, which is a local little nature preserve that takes care of the waterways here and the islands on the Ohio River, and they have a little nature center right across the Ohio River in West Virginia, and a bunch of fish tanks, and they're super informed about the species of fish in the water. We then selected 4 artists that we wanted to have work on this mural. It was myself, Beth Nash, a painting professor at Marrieta College, Haley Bennett, a recent graduate, and then a woman named Julie Zicafus, who is someone, since I had started the Public Art Committee, I had really wanted to get involved with the mural. She is a local naturalist and author. She was the editor of Birdwatchers Digest, and not divisive.
But
We've
does
had
the city weigh in at all on private murals?
no.
So they can
it's
just
private.
paint whatever they want?
Yeah, we don't have any. I mean, that's a whole nother thing. I mean, the council has tried to enact. There's been talks of that, but yeah, there's certain signage rules, but there's nothing against putting a mural on the side of your building. We can't put perpendicular signs on our buildings, but you can put a mural on the side of any building. There's nothing dictating that.
I see that you're part of the city of highways. Did you have to speak to them and show them?
No, I'm not sure the association with that or the tie-in with that. I mean, there are things like we've really wanted to paint pillars under one of the bridges, and that goes through town, but that bridge is also the state highway, and we tried to, so we had to go through ODOT, and it's a prime spot. I've desperately wanted to, it was such an awesome place for a mural, and we tried reaching out to ODOT, and they were like, nope, no murals on our bridges, and so we had to drop that. So we're kind of figuring out and navigating things as we go, and there's different challenges. I've kind of found, initially we thought it would be more challenging dealing with the city than private owners, but it's actually easier dealing with the city. Dealing with private owners could be more challenging because it's hard. The city we have a great relationship with now, and they've been supporting what we've been doing. So.
And then this is only your project?
Yeah.
It's not the other ones
Yeah.
that are non-contract?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, yeah, the big one is right across, when you go outside, right across the street, there's a mural along the parking garage there that a former city councilman, Jeff Schenkel, painted like decades ago before I moved to town, and it's a big a cityscape. Half the mural is on exterior wall and half the mural is on interior wall, and the interior wall section of the mural was fading and peeling terribly and looked awful. They went in and power washed it and put some sort of sealant on it. They didn't repaint it though. It looks better. It now just looks like a faded mural on one side and a nicer preserved mural on one side. But they decided not to repaint it, but it looks way better than when it was peeling. We've had people in town that have repainted like ghost murals, which I think looks really cool. We haven't taken on anything like that, but we've had people ask about it before. But yeah. Any other? Yep.
Maybe more to the mayor.
Yeah.
I'd just be curious as to when the citizens ask about the mural projects, how do you kind of respond to them? I'm just curious, why are you doing this thing?
You probably just direct them to us, I guess, right? If people are asking council about
Well,
murals.
I guess I'm saying from, you guys are sort of elected policy makers, so, is there a certain sort of policy approach that you established or any of that kind of?
Well, we was it last year, I think we tried we approached the council about to formalize policy on murals, but we wanted to try to make consistent or branding uniform, that sort of thing, but we ran into resistance. We had no authority to dictate what would be on public buildings, so we ran into that with how do we balance that out. It's one thing on public property, like the tunnel, bridge, that was an easier project. The bridge, Washington Street Bridge, which is also sitting on 7th, Bobby mentioned, is a bit trickier because other jurisdictions go dock. And I think most of what the reason why they said no, that's their policy. If they said yes to Marietta, then every bridge in the state would be possibly a different type of mural that they didn't start that for whatever reason. So it just depends on the jurisdiction. We just didn't get any traction when we tried.
Yeah, I believe council, I remember during that council meeting when there was discussion about if council should come up with a policy, they actually stated that our committee would be a partnership, and our committee, they trusted that you guys had a good enough relationship and trusted us enough to be making those decisions and kind of overseeing some of these projects. The words, something like that, right, Jen?
Yeah.
I think it was something. So, I mean, there's nothing formal written down, but we have a really good relationship.
Express public trust.
Yeah, and there was definitely some wariness. I remember when we first came to council talking about public art, there was some hesitation and wariness that it was going to get political or it could be offensive. There was some wariness of that, but that's why I'm saying, like, starting with historic murals is something everyone could get behind and is a great way to start things. And then since then, we've gotten a little bit more bolder and experimental, and we've tried new things. But starting with the historical stuff was a great way to like build the relationship with the community and the city, and just so people, you know, realizing like the value and importance of art. And, you know, overall, I think it's just the response from the community and the city has been just nothing but positive, and it's been really a great addition to now. But yeah, thanks for your time, everyone. If anyone wants, I have some cards. If anyone has any questions, feel free to email me. I'm also going to have I'm going to be hanging out today, but during the lunch hour, I'm going to be down in my letterpress shop at 208 Front Street, Just the Jar. If anyone wants to come down and chat more with me or see some of my letterpress work or talk about murals or have questions, feel free to come down. Feel free to give me a call or email any other time. I'm happy to give guidance or just have a discussion about projects happening in your community if you need any advice. Thanks again for coming to Marrieta.
West Side Sign Company, sorry, almost messed that up. So she's going to talk to you for a little bit about that. These are the types of questions that I receive the most phone calls on, is how to put the murals on, what they're made of, and the best practices for that. So Jordana.
Site preparations. I think we went through this. Don't do what these guys are doing. But it's mostly like get there, ask yourself that question, like how do I get people there, and especially how do I get them there safely? Ladders, there's a great illustration for this, is that while you're working, you can see the further down you go, the further away you get. So you have to keep readjusting and working, you know, constantly with ladders. You're basically, you feel like you're fighting the ladder the whole time. Sometimes though you have to use something like a ladder like this. This is a wall wrap that I did at actually theater, and that's why it's at this angle. You can't put a ladder straight up and down on that. You also can't really get into this very far corner over here. So we just use these different ladders that move these different ways. So lifts and scaffolding, there's all kinds of things. You've got scaffold, bucket trucks, scissor lifts, and then articulating lifts. I'll show you examples of all those. So this is how I build scaffolding out of ladders. And it's very adjustable, you know, and it's really just like a one-person thing, but it leaves you completely open to working on so much of a larger area. This is just another example of how to build it across something, like bridging kind of an area that you can't get to. Another one that this isn't a stairwell, and you can't get to that top corner. You can't put your ladder against it, you can't, you know, so you can actually lead things. You just have to really stop and figure out, like, how am I gonna get into that crazy spot? Now scaffolding is great. You can get multiple people working at multiple levels. This is the wall dogs right here. They're working on that whole mural. And then you might end up in a spot where you're on bleachers and somebody wants a giant thing painted across. You know, so you have to just, like I said, you just basically have to work with your situation, but really put some thought into that before you start zooming your planning as to how do we get there. I use a bucket truck quite a bit. The problems with bucket trucks is you have to keep them running. They're stinky, you know. But when a situation like this, you know, I've got a ramp going up this way. I've got an alley that I don't want to block, you know, because it's definitely you've been using all day, you know, and they're dropping off food for all the restaurants that are back here. So in this instance, I can just park the bucket truck there. I can go up and down. It's a smaller mural, you know, so it didn't take that long. So the consideration for that was just fine. And then a scissor lift. Again, great because you can get multiple people up there. You know, you can just work side by side, you're up and down, you're completely safe. You know, you're just, and sometimes you will link yourself in to a scissor lift. Like with this one, this is a space where I saw people like pulling in and out with their vehicles so quick. You know, and that's really the concern when you're on a lift like that. It's not so much as the scissor lift gonna fall over. No, it's never gonna fall over on you. It's too heavy at the bottom, you know, but you really need to link yourself in because if a vehicle hits that, you can be ejected. So you want to be linked into the lift. And they make harnesses for that. And they actually, when I went from United Rentals, sometimes they even do training, they offer training. I think they're probably, are they in everybody's area, do you know? Yeah? Okay. Yeah, they're pretty big, and they will do training on their lifts before you rent them. So it's always a good thing to know because you'll need to plug them in. You need to keep them working. You know, like the last thing you want is like, oh, my computer doesn't work and I got no slideshow, you know. So, also in this other lift, you can see where there's like an extension. A lot of people don't know that about scissor lifts, but there's, over on that side over there, there's a push out. So once you get it up, you can actually push part of it out and you almost get, you know, another, at least half of the lift up there. And another thing to consider is things that just stick out, like that little bit of wall right there that sticks out, a little bit of tiny little fake roofing. So you have to consider that you can't get over that, you know. So yeah, the entire time you're leaning over. And then articulating lifts are great when you can get them. But basically, they just articulating just means, you know, that it can move in different ways, different types of booms. There's so many different types of articulating lifts. Again, there's the wires. So this is a big articulating lift. It's nice. It's you know, it's like an outdoor, can go anywhere sort of lift. And I used this when I was hand painting this lettering, but I was doing all 4 sections. It's a super, super busy farm market, so there's people cruising in and out all the time. But it's great, you know, it's just, you're just up and down, and it just does not wear you out at all. You're just moving that, which is fantastic. So the mural techniques, we do hand painted, poly tab, vinyl, and panels. So hand painted, of course, I think everybody's pretty familiar with, you know. It is definitely durable, and it looks, to me, it looks better with age. Like the older it gets, the cooler it looks, you know, and then you end up with your ghost signs, and they just are, they're fantastic, you know. They are more economical a lot of times, but that also depends on how much labor do you have involved and how painterly is it, or, you know, where basically all those other considerations. They can be definitely very labor intensive. They are an exterior work, so the temperatures have to be right. Everything has to be right. Spring is terrible because it's raining so much, you know, those things. So, and then it's really simpler designs I prefer with blocky. To me, what I prefer to do is something that's more of a blocked, just a color, you know, than the fades. With the fades, you just get more, you have to have a more experienced painter. If you're just blocking in, you're blocking in. Do you have questions?
Are you using like,
Yes, I'll definitely get to that. So this one I pounced, oh, this one I pounced on. Here's what's called pouncing. I'll show you exactly what a pounce pattern is. If you're a quilter, you probably know, but it's on a very large scale. So projectors, that's one way to go. You can, you know, project, again, this is even on a corrugated piece of metal. So, yeah, I show the distortion. This is what happens. Even your letters are smaller, they start to distort. So you have to compensate for that even with the projector, not just the readability of the sign or mural. This is a great example of when you might want to project. You know, you just draw on the basic shapes, get that one, you know, just hand paint it, knock it out. This one I did not do. I don't even know where this photo came from. I probably should have photo credit. I don't know. But I thought it was nice because it kind of just shows how you can block out the color, you know, and really do something big and fantastic. And you would do this with the projector. You know, you can just project it on in sections. You might grid that out. You just really have to plan it all out. Because another thing is you can only project as large as your projector projects. So you have to say, well, okay, and how far can I stand back? Am I in an alley? You know, can I only stand back from here to that wall? Because if so, I can only project so large. And how dark does it need to be? You know, and all these things need tested out. So you're gonna have to go back to your computer and just kind of grid it out, maybe make overlaps or like registration points, you know, little dots that you can line back up from one image to the other so that you're really getting the proper, especially with lettering. Lettering is pretty, you know, it's if one little bit of lettering is off, we notice it. With images like this, maybe not so much. But you don't want to project it down the wall because you're just gonna get distortion. This is also projected. This is my buddy Scott Lindley, and he does panels, which we'll get into in a little bit, but it's basically, it's projected on, I think you can see up at the top, maybe it'll help you see the finished image. But up at the top, you can just see where he's basically taken the different colors that are coming together and blocked it out, made simple colors out of it, and then drawn where those are. Can you see it? Yeah, okay. There's a finished picture of that one here later. So bouncing is what you're asking about. And bouncing is basically a piece of paper with holes in it, and that's really all it is. And you can use a wheel like this and actually push the holes into it, or you can use what's called an electro-bounce machine. I think they quit making them in the 80s. I have one, you can get them, you know, you have to find them on eBay. They run maybe like $1,000 for a machine that just simply zaps holes into paper. But it's way worth it. So this is a picture of that machine. And so I've already drawn, you know, the lettering up on the paper. And then you take that machine and it melts to like a piece of metal. And it's just making an arc. But it's just zapping holes. So you take that piece of paper, you zap all the holes in it. Then you go tape up your pattern onto the side of a silo. And then you hit it with chalk. So you can see the very bottom one right there where there's like a 2. There's a number 2 in there, and I've just hit that with a chalk. And they call that pounce. And then once you take that down, you take all the paper down, you can see it, the image, just barely in these lines of chalk. But from the street, you look like you're magic. You just walked up and painted letter, you know, like out of nowhere. So with this one, just to see what it looked like in the end, it looked like that in the end. So pretty simple, but looking at it from the road, it was just like, how did you do that? But yeah, pouncing is great. You can order pounce patterns. I think there are places online where you can actually order a pounce pattern from somebody. These are like in 4-foot sections. I'd be happy to do a pounce pattern for some. I have done pounce patterns for people, actually. Yeah, so it's just, you know, they just needed it pounced up on the wall. They want to paint it. You can do that. Yeah, totally. This is another example. I don't know if you can. Yeah, you can see it. So that's a pounce pattern right there. It's completely zapped out. This one just has a little bit of an outline, so just to show that you can still do outlines in different types of colors. So that's basically hand painting, you know. Or there's also the way that they went with the tunnel work and the other parts of Marrieta where they're just like, you know, which is great too. Which is great. So this is Polytab, and I just learned this 2 years ago in Parkersburg. And what it is it was developed in Philadelphia, and they also call it the parachute technique. So it is durable, they say more than direct paint, and up to 20 years. And it's super, super community oriented, great groups of people to work with, and it's very labor intensive. It's definitely, again, it's one of those things you have to wait till summer to do, you know, spring, summer, fall. You can't be, but it's exterior and interior work. So a lot of the prep work is done inside. A mass amount of work is done inside. The installation, of course, is just outside. You could do it interior though. You could do it interior for sure. And it's semi-removable. What they're telling me, I've never seen them remove, but what they're telling me is that when you peel it down, you know, you're gonna have some pressure washing to do, maybe a little scraping or whatnot, but it's not like it's hand painted completely all the way through. So what you do with Polytab is, it's parachute cloth. It's the same thing that keeps your shirt color, like standing up. It's inside there, it's parachute cloth. So you take that, you cut it down into your sections, which we did 5-foot by 5-foot sections in this mural. You project the image onto those sections. So this is nice because you're in a controlled environment again, you know, and you're just projecting your 5-by-5 grid square over and over for as many sections as you have. Then you label those. Remember the one that I was showing you that had the different lines for the different colors? You label those with numbers. So you just basically made like a giant paint by number. And that's where your community comes in. So your community comes in and they pick out a paint. The paint has a number. The number goes on that section. And they just come paint. And it was just a great experience. And the panels, they are put up on the wall, then they're repainted again. So when you're thinking about it, you're going through painting it. The community paints it, you take it back in the studio, you repaint it, just to touch it up. Make sure, you know, just kind of fill the gaps or whatever it is. You put it up on the wall and you paint it again and retouch it again. So you're looking at 3 layers of paint. On top of that, it's gelled to the wall and then varnished afterward. So labor intensive, yes. Very labor intensive, but like, gonna last a long time? Totally. So this is the layout that we did. This is on the Parkersburg Art Center if you're driving out of town, 8 miles south in West Virginia. We also did one in Charleston, West Virginia the same summer. So this is the art, but this is it gridded off. And those are 5-foot by 5-foot panels. So it was pretty massive. But the great thing is, as well, the community's painting it, which is, we had, you know, just community parties, outside, inside, wherever. You know, they're 5-by-5 panels. You have just these, you know, fold out, whatever, order some pizza, you know, have it at different places. We sent some panels to churches. You know, you just, whatever you want to do, and everybody has the color and everybody has the number. So it's pretty basic. Then you take that right back in. You can see the number there, right? Up there, where the purple is. So there's a number 13 written on it. And that was that purple for 13. So yeah, tons and tons of people getting involved. At the parks, just wherever. There was, I think, over 200 and some participants with just that mural. And then so it goes back in the studio. And this is, just retouching it, putting the panels together, making sure that that number 13 got painted, the right number 13 all the way through. Yeah.
So do the numbers get printed out on the panels, or do you have to go through and put them on?
It's all hand drawn by projector and all hand numbered.
Wow.
Yeah, a lot of prep work goes into it. Yeah, but again, these are 5x5 panels, so that they could be intricate sections or they could be not so intricate sections. Did you?
So the pro is that it lasts longer and it's community.
It's community involvement. I mean, I can't even tell you how cool it was. Just to have all of these people just come and just paint, and it was especially like it was mask season. So it was just like you got to get out, you got to get back, and you got to just make kind of a mess. Now you need to put your tarps down in the parking lot, that sort of thing. So prep work is a must, but yes, it definitely lasts longer. But the community involvement was amazing. These girls are in your resource list. They're Good Space Murals.
And then they would come in and do that for you, like set it up.
They'll throw the party, they'll do the whole, they come in, they talk to your community for like 3 days, 4 days, they visit the community, they go back, they bring you a design, and they work with the community in that, and I think they had so many revisions even with just this one. Yeah, and then they come at a certain time and they have the panels already numbered, so that's not part of the community involvement part, is basically, here's the panels, paint them.
The good part.
Yes!
I was gonna say, I'm like, you're never doing this. I'm like, whoa, we can hire somebody.
Yes, Good Space Murals out of Minnesota.
Okay.
Yeah, and they're on your list there. And there's another one, but they're actually making a community institute, I think is what they called it. They're making that where they're teaching people this, and that's what when these girls showed up, they just got a hold of me. I don't remember how, and they said, we're into like skill sharing, which is just like, wow, like that's fantastic because we're into like showing you how to do what we do, and they go do it too, and that's just like that's them, to a T. So yeah, and then the next thing was you just put it up, So it's this is the goopy goo. It goes behind it and it goes on top of it and it dries clear, and then you go back up and repaint it. This is one we worked on in Charleston, and this is it finished as well. This is not even finished. That's not even retouched, but that's a big, it's big. It's a big section of it. Hey. Right. So yeah, the parachute material is super readily available. Like they just crank it out all the time as far as fashion industry or whatnot. If you're looking for, but you would buy it in a bolt. You might be able to find it smaller. I don't know if you can find sections of it. I did see someone even though was printing them online, so maybe you could even have them translate your image and already print the numbers on it, like you were saying. I mean, it's actually kind of a newer system of doing this, But the other great part is you can get all of this stuff prepped inside. So if you're thinking of hand painting something on the wall, you might think, well, maybe we just want to paint it inside where it's nice, I'm not getting sunburned, and we can just slap it up on the wall. And this is, I think you can even find on their website, it's a Nova gel, acrylic gel that they use to adhere it. And like I said, they are sharers of information, which is profound. They're not trying to keep this as a secret. They're trying to say everybody do this as much as possible. So they're fantastic. And any information I have too, you guys are more than welcome to reach out and I'll help you as much as I can. I'm sorry. It's called Nova Gel. It's this stuff. It's disgusting. I ruined my favorite pair of overalls that day because I had no clue. And it's just like it dries like Elmer's glue on you. And it's just, but it's in. We were using it in 5-gallon buckets, and you literally put the 5x5 section down and you roll that stuff on there. So again, very labor intensive because even the roller's heavy. Especially by like the 10th panel. So yeah, you roll it on the back side, you put it up, you push everything out from behind it, getting it into cracks, and then you do the top section. What I did would be the laminate. The laminate would probably go like brown, but these are removable. I've taken them off before, and they actually I did one for a real estate agent, and They put it up because they didn't want any signage mounted to the building, so we put it up, and when it sold, she just grabbed it and pulled it down. She called me to come remove it, and I said, just try taking it down, and she had it down in 5 minutes. So, super removable. I don't tell a lot of people that though, because that's what those are, and if they're at ground level, you don't really want them removed, but they're fantastic. They install, you just take them up to temperature. This is me working with my buddy Jerome, and it could be a hot day with 1,000-degree. There's the cook shop one right there. So that's my brother. So you can do different shapes with them. The other great thing about them is you can reproduce exact art. So like when this artist won a contest, she thought she was going to have to paint her painting on the wall. She was terrified, and then when it was just, oh no, you just come up and you just stick it on the wall. We spoke about this one, same thing, that's exact art, that's digital art. This was a photograph of a painted piece of art. And you can also do, obviously, just photos. So this is kind of the process here. I am working off a ladder, but it was fine that day. So you just kind of start right there at the top, just hang it like wallpaper if you've ever hung wallpaper, and it's already adhesive on the back. There's a little bit of tackiness on the back, but it's still adjustable, So you just kind of start at the top, pose for a photo with the building owner, and then you just kind of tap it down. So you can see here where it's, what I'm working on has not been sunk in, but you can see the brick behind it. That one's already been completely worked in. And you really just take you have a heat gun, little roller, and you roll it back and forth. That's the best way. The thing is just to take it up to temperature, and they take about 30 days to cure because you have an adhesive and it's behind a plastic. So it's like saran wrapped in there, So really, I've had them fail, and that's how I know. And I read the 40-page bulletin. You have to take it up to like 1,000 degrees, and it shouldn't freeze within 30 days of installation. So again, you have this, it's great process, but it's only outdoor during certain times. But yeah, so you can see even where I had a little bit of a mistake in lining up right there. So you can get these wrinkles in it, and you can get them right out. They just heat right out. And that right there that's an attachment to a heat gun with a roller on it that just basically sinks it right in. And that's what it looks like from the top. Looks like it's painted, but it was his digital art. The other thing about this that's so great is he did this with what's that called? Procreate on an iPad. So we were able to create a large enough file, and lots of people are using Procreate. I don't use it. He uses it fantastically, and it is great. I learned on Photoshop, and I'll be Photoshop. That's it. But so many people know, especially younger people, and it's a $10 program, I think. So you buy the program. What is it? It might be free. Oh, okay. Great. Yeah, so you can just take it with your iPad, draw anywhere. We were able to create it in enough pixels to blow it up that large, and you can see how sharp it is. It's just super, super sharp. And that immediately is what happens. I was just got my ladder put up, and I was like, oh wow. So, and here's just another time that you can use vinyl. This is what the building looked like first. This is us putting it on, and this is like an aluminum siding, a disgusting aluminum siding, and we just brightened it right up. Yeah. And again, it was designed on an iPad. So then panels are the next way to go for installation. Okay. We've got a little bit of texture right there on this thing. You want to be able to take it down whenever you want to. You might want to move it. You might want this hanging out somewhere for selfies, and then you think, we'll just move to the back of the building. More people see it there, whatever it is. So panels are definitely a nice way to go. They could probably be, they're probably less expensive because of your installation time, and that sort of thing. It just depends on the look that you want. They don't look as permanent, but hanging any type of panel is great. But you can also still hand paint panels. So this is cornbread again. So I've given him credit here. I got that in there. And these are just huge panels that he's pounced off. There's your pouncing. So you can see up close, where he's pounced off just the different sections of what he's painting. But they're hand-painted wooden panels. You can cut them to shapes. He's got the top part up there that he's going to cut into a shape. and it just looks amazing, super durable. I think he uses Nova paints. They're on your resource list there. They're water-based paint, but they are just chock full of pigment. Like when you get it on your hand and you go like this, it's all over your hand. You also notice that when you buy that paint, it's the color that it dries, which is just letting you know that that's more pigment than it is anything else in there. You know, so different, a little different than like the paint you might be used to painting in your house. So then a finished installation, you know, does it look like it's painted directly on there? No, but does it get the point across? And is it movable? Yes, yes, it's awesome, and it just looks like wow. And can you do all the work inside in the comfort of air conditioning or heat? You know, great, great. So they hang these a lot of times with French cleats too, which are just like they're on the back side, if you know what those might be. And then if not, you can just directly go through different panels. You can use aluminum panels like what we're using for the frames that we're putting down in the next project. You know, you just use aluminum panels on both sides. You can vinyl wrap those, but I wouldn't ever vinyl wrap wood. So just don't let it be porous behind it. So just you can always, you know, take a piece of wood, put a piece of metal on top of it, and wrap that. So yeah, another muralist group though to check out is the Wall Dogs. I think they only have a Facebook now. I don't think that they have even a website anymore. But they're the hand painters. You know, they're out there like in Illinois. You know, but they're a group of hand painters that will get together. They're letterheads. They're all normally sign painters, but they get together and they like get to a town. They spend a week. They pounce a lot of stuff. They project a lot of stuff. They do not use vinyl, and you know, but their work is fantastic and really worth a look. And these are your different sources for your paints. These are in your resource list. That's Good Space Murals. There's their logo, and that's my business logo there. And we made it with 8 minutes to spare. So, we have more questions? Yep.
I just want to say how valuable resource Leanne has been in your system when you're trying to get people or starting up. Having someone that's so knowledgeable about transfers, equipment, her range of source cover. I've worked with her on many projects, and it's like I love having her come and speak because she looks at it in a different way than my artist before I look at it. She looks at it from a logistical point of view. So I'm saying like you can find a person or
Talk to you a little bit about the collaboration we do with the artists.
Hello, good afternoon. Hope you guys had a chance to get some food and walk around town, check it out. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about good practices when it comes to working with artists. I think a lot of the issues that arise between people that collaborate with artists or commission them and artists themselves is that it's just a lack of understanding and awareness of what being an artist and being a freelance creative means. There's a lot of parts that people just don't know. If you're not in the art field, you don't understand the challenges. Yes?
Could you move a little
Sure.
closer to the microphone?
Sure.
Thank you.
The challenges involved with being an artist. So if you're not aware, then it's, you know, you might just not know that the way you approach something might not be acceptable for an artist. So I just want to shed a little bit of light on some of the things as artists that we deal with, some of the potential pitfalls and challenges that come with collaborating with artists. I've been this PowerPoint a very long time. So yeah, I'm Alex Group. I am a local artist and designer, and I've been on the Public Art Committee for a good bit, and I've done projects for the Public Art Committee, and obviously I've been a part of creating other projects along with other artists, so I kind of have a viewpoint on either side of it. I understand from the artist's perspective, and now after being on the committee for a number of years, I understand what the committee, you know, thinks about when we're collaborating with artists. So hopefully, since I have like a dual viewpoint, I can sort of explain it from either side a little bit. As artists, we are always fighting the starving artist stereotype and trying to push for fair terms and good compensation and all of those things. There aren't national standards that really cover the full scope of public art commissioning. So a lot of times there can be kind of a unequal power balance between the people that commission them and the artists. And this can play out in a number of really horrible scenarios if you're not careful. Things like complex negotiations, unfair terms, undervaluing, devaluing of their time, poor communication. This is just to name a few. There's a lot of problems that can arise, but I'm hoping that talking through some of these instances will help to keep that from being an issue whenever you're reaching out to artists and collaborating with them. I'm not going to deep dive into the entire process because, as you kind of got a sense from what Bobby and Jordana talked about, the process is really project specific, and it's dependent on where you are, what kind of artist you're working with, the medium, location, all of those factors come to play. So there really isn't one framework for how the process is. So I'm going to kind of dive into a pretty standard process, but I really want to highlight some of the problem areas when it comes to commissioning artists. So we'll talk about the work you do up front before you even have a commission or put out a commission, the actual commission itself and how to approach that, and then the actual creation of the piece, and just to talk a little bit about making public art more equitable. So before you even reach out to artists, it's important to put the upfront work in. So it's kind of like the pre-commission phase. It's a lot of planning. This part is so important to set up the project for success and make it run really smoothly. Yeah, you want to set up the who, what, where, when, why, and how, and beyond. So everything you can think about a project and how that's going to play out, you want to sit down and really put that down on a piece of paper in concrete terms and figure out all of the logistics with the project. And this really is what sets up the artist's brief. As a freelance artist, I get these all the time when I'm working on projects. It's basically a document that has all of the important information in it that an artist will need to know to either submit a piece of art in some instances, or to submit a proposal to be considered to work with the committee. The artist's brief should be really, really detailed as much as you can. It's pretty much the blueprint for the project. So it really outlines all of the things you need to consider when you're doing a project. Yeah, and not only is this really helpful to artists because they can see if they're a good fit for the project, if they are able to commit the time to the project, but it also outlines everything that you need to know going forward. So it's really helpful for both people involved. Some of the things that you might include in the project brief are the purpose and rationale, who is the audience, what are the desired outcomes artistically and socially, especially if there's like a community component, much like the project that Jordana was talking about, where the community was heavily involved. Dealing with the community is a completely different skill set than creating art, so some artists may not be a good fit for something like that. So it's important to define that up front so that they know if they're going to be a good fit for the project. You want to outline any restrictions or challenges. This might be if you want to work with a certain kind of material or medium specifically. What is the type of work? Is it temporary, permanent, integrated, functional, commemorative? Basically, what is the lifespan that you hope this piece to have, and what purpose is it serving? This one is really essential, like everything about the space. So size, location, characteristics. As an artist, it's hard to come up with any kind of proposal or any kind of budget if we don't know the scale and the specifications of what we're supposed to be creating. So having that outlined, responsibilities of the artist, any eligibility criteria. For instance, we like to work with artists within a certain mile radius of our town, so something like that is important to stipulate up front. Thematic or stylistic directions, a general timeline, very helpful for artists to know if they can devote the time to this project. And budget. And budget is super tricky when it comes to dealing with artists. It's complex, and it's not like a one-size-fits-all scenario. But just keep in mind when you're thinking about budget or you're looking over a budget proposal from an artist, that the budget is covering more than just creation of the art. As artists, we kind of work like architects. We have to do proposals, we fulfill engineering criteria and specifications, work with other artists and other contractors to create and install the work, and then general admin costs and all that kind of thing. So there's a lot involved in creating a piece of art, especially for public art, because there's an installation component to it. So it's a lot more than just sitting around making a picture, you know, creating something. There's a lot involved. Things to think about when you are budgeting, things like cost of design, engineering, fabrication, transportation, installation, de-installation, so many components. My point with rattling all this off is there's a lot of elements that go in. It's just important to think about every part of the project and what the cost might be to come up with a budget that works. A really general percentage, but I hate to even throw this out there because again, it's so project specific, but 20 to 30% of the total budget gives you a rough idea of what the artist fee should be, but again, it's so dependent on your project and the specifics of that. I want to talk, Bobby kind of touched on this, about a couple of projects we did. The one that we did where we all kind of came together and we had a one-day event, that was a volunteer-only project. Artists were not compensated, but we were very transparent about that up front, so they knew they weren't getting compensation. And as Bobby said, we did things and provided other incentives, like we provided food, we had the supplies. You saw the nice video that we did that was kind of like media exposure. It highlighted all of the artists. And they had complete and total creative freedom. So even though this was a volunteer-only project, we made sure to provide other things that made it worthwhile for them to participate. And then there are times when projects have set budgets or lower budgets, and that's fine to do. Just be mindful of the type of project that this might be for. For instance, the poster project that is the gallery. It was kind of a lower budget, but the thing about it was we kept the theme it was completely open, so we were hoping that then artists would have pieces in their portfolio that they could submit, so they didn't have to do any extra work. If they weren't selected, then they weren't out all of that time. So something like that works really well for like a lower budget project. And those are great for up and coming artists too that don't have a lot of experience, because they can get their foot in the door, but there's not a lot of work involved and they're not having to do any kind of installation with that. Let's see. And then if you're uncomfortable with setting a budget, you can always have the artist propose the budget, which is a really good way to kind of kick off any negotiations. At least it gives a starting point and you can kind of see where you're at with that. So if you're unsure about it, you can always have them propose a budget. And usually that's best case scenario because they usually know their process, they know what's going to be involved, so they're going to know how much financial compensation they'll need to make that happen. And the other important thing with this upfront part is obtaining relevant approvals and permits, which Bobby talked about. This is so important because if you don't get the upfront approvals, then projects usually have major setbacks or sometimes they're completely derailed. And what this means for the artist is they either lose the money completely, they've already put work in, so they've lost that time. If it's a setback, as a freelance artist, we have to schedule out projects. So if we have a setback with one project, then everything kind of snowballs and we get set, it affects our entire timeline of working with other projects. So you just need to be aware that that will have effect on the artist and to try and avoid that when you can. And these might be from, you've heard Bobby talk about all the different kinds of organizations and individuals that he's had to get approvals from for different projects, and each project is completely different. So sometimes it's going to be groups and organizations, sometimes it'll be individuals, sometimes it's a combination of the two. You just need to make sure to figure out who all the parties involved are and make sure to reach out to them and get that approval and sign off before you start any work on it. Anybody have any questions at this point? No? And the other important thing, I might have missed one. I did, sorry. The other important thing as far as getting approvals is involving the community when it's appropriate. Obviously, public art has a big impact on communities and neighborhoods, so when you can and when it makes sense to, involving them up front is really great, so that they can feel like part of it, and you're making sure that they feel involved in something that may impact kind of their day-to-day. We did have a situation in which we did not involve a certain neighborhood in our town up front with one of our projects, and unfortunately there were concerns and issues, and that project did get scrapped. So we have had this happen, and we've learned from that, and I don't think we've had issues really since then. So we have, I think, learned our lesson of how to kind of avoid that situation. But it is great to involve the community on many levels, but just as far as making sure that they're involved up front, so there's no pushback when you start doing the work and putting the work in. Okay, now we're to the point, we've done all the upfront work, it's a lot, but now we're to the point where we can actually reach out to artists or try and find an artist to work with, so the actual commissioning of the artist. And we're gonna just talk about, there's a couple different ways you can commission for an artist, talk a little bit about contracts and artist rights, and the selection and review kind of structure. So yeah, there's a lot of different ways you can commission for an artist. The most basic one, and the one that we kind of started with in a way, was a direct commission where you reach out to a specific artist that you know their work, maybe they're a really good fit for a project, maybe they've worked with the materials that you want to work with, whether it's vinyl or paint or a sculpture, whatever. So you reach out to the artist specifically. This is great if you've never done this before. It's a lot easier than having to do any kind of request for proposals. So this is a great way to get up and running. I would say, like Bobby touched on, don't do this with every project you have, because it will potentially be viewed as biased, and you're kind of playing favoritism. So it's fine if you do this, and my advice is to kind of mix up the different projects, so you're trying to hit different types of artists as opposed to just ones that you're familiar with. The other couple of approaches, one is an open competition in which the artist is going to submit artwork to be considered for a project. This is very similar to the gallery that we're doing, in which people sent in artwork and we selected the artwork. So this isn't necessarily based on experience, because we're just basing it on the actual piece of art itself. Something like this is really, like I've said before, I think up and coming artists, this is fantastic for. If they don't have a lot of experience, it's a way for them to kind of get their foot in the door with public art. And so that's a really great thing to have. Just make sure you have fair terms. There are actually, sometimes competitions are frowned on, because if it's something that is a really specific theme and the artist has to create something for this, and again, with them potentially not getting selected, then that's work they put in that they're not going to get compensated for. So there are a lot of artists, especially established artists, that tend not to go into competitions like this. But as I explained with our Post Street project, if you have a very vague concept or something general or an open concept, then hopefully artists have pieces that they can submit that they've already created. So there are times to use a model like this, but you just need to be mindful of how it might impact the artist and the expectations from them. And then a couple of other forms of ways to commission are RFQs and RFPs. They're very similar with one distinct difference. RFQs are requests for qualifications. Basically, you have artists submit their body of work or portfolio samples, usually a resume or a CV, and then also some sort of written statement that talks about the piece they're planning to create for you, the concept behind it, how it connects to the theme or whatever the artist brief kind of lays out. RFPs are very similar to that, except the difference, and these are called requests for proposals. RFPs are when similar things that you have to enter, except instead of a written statement, you actually have to enter a completed and fully fleshed out concept. Again, RFQs are preferred only because you're not asking for upfront work. It's not to say that RFPs don't happen. They happen quite a bit. All the way?
Yep. Dead battery.
So they're fully fleshing out a concept for you. As a committee member, great, because we see what we want, right? So we know what we want when we see it. As an artist, though, upfront work, and so you may not get a lot of artists tend to steer away from this kind of commissioning model only because they don't want to put in work that they're not going to get compensated for. Understandable, right? We don't want to go to a job and do a job that we're not going to get paid for. So that's kind of why one is preferred over the other. Yeah, so there's a bunch of different models. Then once you've kind of determined how you want to work with an artist, if it's a one-on-one basis, if it's a call for entries, if it is a type of request for qualifications, what have you, it's important to have a really good, solid contract and agreement in place. And I'm not going into the full breadth of legal concerns because I'm not a lawyer and there's a lot of them, but I just want to touch on some of the really big ones that tend to be points of contention when it comes to artists and contracts. The biggest thing to kind of understand is how copyright law works with art, and I think that a lot of people don't really realize that when you produce an original piece of art in any type of medium, you are the author and copyright owner of that art. So when I produce a piece of art, I own that. I own the copyright automatically. That's how copyright law works. Physical ownership is not the same as copyright ownership. So if you are purchasing or commissioning an artist for a mural, you can't then take that mural and do art and do whatever you want with it. That actually, they would need to be added compensation. You are paying to use the mural in a capacity, and beyond that is actually beyond the scope of what the project is. That's not to say that you can't work something out with the artist to license the art for something else. For example, we create stickers to use as a fundraising tool, and the artists we work with have been contacted and made aware of that, and they have signed off on that. So that is like kind of beyond the scope, but we're not using it for a for-profit basis. We're just using it to try and raise funds for further art. Typically, artists retain the copyright to their artwork, but usually they will grant a license for reasonable use of images of the artwork for publicity, educational, and reasonable promotional purposes, upon which is agreed upon up front. So whatever the terms are, whatever you want those to be, just make sure that everything is kind of worked out up front with your agreements. I actually had a friend who does public art in Canada tell me a story about there was a TV show that was filming in the mural. Her mural was going to be in the background, and they contacted her, and she was actually compensated for just that usage. So just to give you an idea of like, this is standard practice, like if that is going to be used in a capacity outside of that, that they do deserve further compensation. And then the last kind of thing to talk about with artist rights is VARA, which is the Visual Artist Rights Act. Aside from copyright, any tangible visual works of art are protected by VARA, even if the artist no longer owns the copyright. This is the right to claim authorship of the artwork, prevent the use of the artist's name on any artwork the artist did not create, prevent the use of the art which would be, oops, sorry, I have to read this because I don't know this terminology right off the top of my head. But basically, prevent the use of the artist's name on any work the artist did not create, prevent the use of the art which would be prejudicial to the artist's reputation or honor. You can't mutilate or distort or anything like that. So even if they sign their copyright away, they still have VARA rights. So you can't completely take their name off, change the artwork. They still are protected under VARA rights that protect their reputation. There is a request usually for artists to waive their VARA rights, especially if the art is part of a building, landscape, or infrastructure. But even if they waive their rights, it's still good practice to reach out to them and notify them anytime there is a removal or relocation of the art. And then a last kind of few legal terms to kind of touch on is artist credit, payment of compensation, and termination. Artist credit, regardless of who owns the right, is always essential to have. We have a plaque that we use next to the piece. I've seen where some cities have like QR codes next to the artwork that you can take a picture of, and it will actually send you to a website that has more information about the artist. So there's a lot of different ways you can approach credit. It doesn't have to be the name right next to it, but you just want to make sure to outline that up front so the artist is aware. You also want to make sure that anytime it's used in any kind of photographic or video reproduction, that there is also credit given to the artist. Payment and compensation, the big thing with this is just how you schedule out the payments. It's great if you can get with the artist and kind of figure out what's going to work best for them. Sometimes with projects, as Jordana talked about, there's equipment rentals that need to be made up front. You have to hire assistants. So sometimes a percentage of the budget up front is really helpful for the artist so that they can set all of that up before the work begins. Yeah, and then termination. Things happen, sometimes projects get completely terminated. If it's of no fault to the artist, it is important, if they put work in, that they are compensated in some way for the work they put in, regardless of if the project continues. I know this can't always happen, but it is important to try to compensate artists whenever they put in work and effort, even if the project kind of goes sideways. And lastly, in this section, just talking about the review process, how that's set up and structured. It's important that your committee is really balanced when it comes to all different kinds of factors, but specifically, I think having different professions on our committee is really helpful, and specifically someone that's in the art field in some way. It doesn't have to be an artist, but they can give more of an artist's perspective and be an advocate for artists a lot better because they understand how, what artist challenges face. They understand what the process is like. So I think having someone in the art world in some way is great. I talked about how great it was having Jordana as a resource. We've had excellent people on our committee that know a lot about the red tape and who to get approvals from. So having a mix of people is really helpful because there's so many moving parts to doing public art that not everyone can fit, into all of those roles. It also keeps it, a very balanced as far as reviewing. It keeps it more, balanced and unbiased. And speaking, I'm just going to kind of breeze through this last kind of process because it's really just a general consideration for how you work with artists at this point, thinking about things like good communication and planning, working out logistics and clear expectations up front, and being flexible and kind of understanding. But I think to kick things off, typically meeting in person is really helpful to kind of put names to faces and outline roles of the committee. For instance, as an artist, if you have a group of people that the committee is comprised of, who do I report to? Who's the point person? If I have problems, who do I talk to? So outlining those roles so the artist knows who they're communicating with is really helpful. Ask questions to understand their entire process. The more we kind of understand where each other are coming from, I think the whole process runs a lot smoother. And try and keep everything in writing. It's nice to have something to reference later on. Like I said, a lot of moving parts, a lot of components to doing public art. So having that in writing that you can look back on is really helpful. Next, really visiting the space with the artist. Jordana touched on this a lot. Looking at the space, what are the problem areas? What are the concerns? Do we need equipment? Are there any kind of safety considerations? So seeing the actual space is really helpful, and talking through those, I think, together helps everyone get on the same page. Outlining expectations. What are the expectations from the artist? What are the expectations from the group? So when can you expect to see concepts, and when can they expect to get timely feedback from you? What's your process for the review? So I think everybody understanding each other's process is really important, and knowing all the expectations and responsibilities. Who's in charge of subcontracting? Is it a situation where I'm working directly with a vinyl vendor? Am I getting the equipment? Are you getting the equipment? Break all of that down. Am I expected to do multiple presentations or presentations to a group for review? Are there media or promotional interviews? And is there a community component that needs to be involved there? So again, just kind of, and if you've done the work up front, this should all kind of already be outlined. And then from all of that, you can kind of set up a timeline so that everyone knows when things are expected and break down any major milestones of the project. And then post-install considerations, credit, obviously, making sure that that's set up and maintained if it's used in any way. Is the artist responsible for any removal? Are they responsible for any maintenance if there's graffiti, outlining all of that? And yeah, overall, just making sure to be flexible and considerate. I've talked about how projects that kind of get setbacks, how that really affects an artist's timeline with other work that they might be doing. And again, all artists are different. Some artists only do murals or they do installs, and some are doing, like me, I do occasional installs, but I have client work. So setbacks can really affect the artist's entire schedule of work. So if something happens, I think it's important to communicate with the artist and work out how you can get the schedule back on track, but not expect them to kind of scramble to make up for lost time. And then if any substantial redesign has to happen for any reason, due to no fault of the artist, like I said before many times, the artist should be compensated for any work that's been done up to that point. Yeah, and just the last thing I want to touch on is just making public art more equitable. Thinking about when you're selecting artists, inclusion, diversity, breaking down institutional barriers. Some artists do not have formal training or they don't have experience, and how can you create projects that will still help them kind of uplift them and have experience with public art. Yeah, uplifting new emerging artists and just like overall reflecting the community and involving them. Yeah, and as I said, there's no one size fits all. I know I threw a lot at you, but it's just really being respectful and understanding of how artists work and understanding where they're coming from and considering that whenever you're making your terms and conditions and how you're scheduling things out and just overall how you're working with them. I think that's it. Anyone have questions or thoughts?
I have a quick question about, I guess it would be called licensing.
Yeah.
So we're creating an art walk where we would basically take photographs of local artists' work.
Yes.
And then blow them up really big, use the heat vinyl. We did this with historical photos last year. It was a big success. We're gonna do it this year. We're having, and I've talked to a bunch, I work with artists all the time, and I've talked to a bunch of them, just kind of interviewing them on how they would feel about their art being used in this way. We're not asking them to create any new art. It would be something, and then obviously there'd be a QR code to their site.
Yeah.
I've received kind of split
Yes.
answers as
Yes.
to if people would want compensation or if they wouldn't.
Yeah.
And I don't want to offend anybody. I mean, I'm just gonna kind of come out and say, like, you know, hey, we can give you an honorarium or you can donate it back to the cause, because it won't happen if we don't have the money. So that's the other problem too. I'm not sure how to like phrase that.
Yeah.
Or what would you suggest in that situation?
Well, I want to touch on first that you said like it's split, because this is the thing about dealing with artists that I think is important to keep in mind. We all are different, and that's why it's like if you're unsure, like don't just assume, like ask questions, because artists, like one thing I forgot to touch on is just about contract terms. Like be open to negotiation. Some artists are totally comfortable with terms, others are not. Like it's a personal preference kind of thing. So just that's an interesting aspect. It's just like we're all different. But yeah, I mean, I think the problem with that is it's kind of got to be across the board. So you're either compensating or you're not.
Of course.
And I think if you just say, hey, we can't provide compensation, but we will provide X, Y, and Z, and basically they either opt in or they don't. I think that's what we're always struggling with. Like, there's been times where we're like, well, if we do that, like, I want to say the Post Street project where we had people submit, it's like, we were just like, well, I hate to have them submit and then not get selected. And I was like, yeah, but we kept the theme general. You know what I mean? You say like, basically, here's what we have, what we're working with. You're either okay with it, on board, or not, and
Sure.
they just have that option. At least you're being transparent up front. You know, there's really no other way about that. Just you have to just be like, this is what I got. You're either on board or you're not, and then accept if they're not. You know, kind of thing. I don't know if that helps, but
It does.
Yeah.
Half of them, the ones that said they didn't want compensation is they said, this is an advertisement for us. Like, why? I mean, this is a free ad. Are you kidding me? Like, of
Yeah.
course. And the other people were like, well, no, this is my art. If I put it anywhere, I need to get paid for it. And it's
Yeah.
like, I can totally see both those sides.
Right.
But I'm also like, if
Yeah.
we don't have, if we were giving all the funds to you guys, we can't pay to actually put it up. So,
yeah.
like,
So is it
a
for
challenge.
profit or is
No,
it?
no, we're a nonprofit. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's just like personal preference, and it's licensing is so tricky. I feel like it's just been really talked about like in the past, I don't know, 5-10 years, honestly. And I'm an artist, and I just am like, whoa, like it's like my mind in the past 5 years been like, okay, this is a whole different way than when I was coming out as an artist. Like, so it is kind of still, I think, gray area, you know. So yeah, I mean that's my best advice. Like it is, I think as long as you're transparent, and just like here it is. I understand if you can't do it, and just you know that's all you can do, really. Yeah.
So I apologize.
First of all, thank you so much for your time and attention today. I do want to say just a few clarifying things for those of you, Nina, who are asking questions. So in Marrieta, they have a Main Street board of directors, and then they have committees under that board, the same as you all do. Design committee, you know, organize all those committees, and this is a subcommittee of that board. Right? So it's a part of the Main Street organization, and a lot of times committees don't require application process. It's more of a person-to-person, hey, you'd be great to help us with this particular task, and so come and actually do some work. And I'm sure that Jen and everybody that spoke today would be more than happy to answer further questions. Also, for those of you who are fairly new to the Main Street world, Josh, I'm looking at you. You all know that you can reach out to Heritage Ohio at any point in time to kind of get clarification on how to put together this organizational piece, because if your organization stuff isn't together, then your shit's just not going to work, right? Trying to get things to actually operate without that undercurrent of organization is super hard. Jen just had her 1-year anniversary yesterday. She's also making leaps and bounds on getting city funding and doing lots of really exciting things in Marrieta for the Main Street program and concept here. They also do not have design review. So no downtown historic district. And while that might seem less cumbersome, it also provides a lot of insecurity for people who want to put development dollars into those buildings. And how am I protecting the investment of those people if the person next door can, you know, just tear down their building or put up vinyl siding or, you know, make all the windows this big, right? So we can also talk more going forward in that realm too, and maybe next time that sort of a session on something having to do with how to work with design review board in all of this. I know that in Delaware we started to try to write public arts guidelines. Oh, just hang me.
That's where we are.
It's a nightmare because then everybody gets an opinion on what is art, right? And
Well, we're trying to get it to where the city gives us, and we have a big art center in Worthington, so we partner with them and ask the city to create a public arts committee that they would then grant authority to, for then that group to
Without approval,
create the
city.
policies and goals and stuff. So it won't be just solely part of our organization, but then we will have an application process of who sits on the, on this committee.
Sure.
But, yeah.
And then the same thing that this committee said is that you all didn't want it to kind of look like that just these 5 people are curating everything that's going on in your community. How do we make it equitable and inclusive? So those are all really big concerns, and every time we do a training like this, I'm always thinking, okay, we should have talked about that. Right? So I have a bunch of notes. The other thing I'll say is a big apology on
not covering historic tax credits today. Frank had a death in his family very recently, to the point that I didn't even let Jen know that Frank wasn't coming today. But that's, and frankly, it's not something that Matt or I could very adequately step into and give you a presentation on that. So, so we are going to cut you all a little bit early today, like Matt.
So Frank wasn't able to join us today. We are having a special workshop February 23rd in Athens, specifically on federal and
And I really appreciate all your time and attention today. Thanks so much to Jen for all the organization. You know, we at Heritage Ohio, we always partner with communities, but you all do the lion's share of the work in bringing us to your local communities. So I really appreciate all the effort that went into planning